I'll call a meeting to order. Thank you all. I'd like to begin this meeting with a bit of an announcement. I'm wearing a tie from the Royal Canadian Legion. The Legion is one of the strong supporters in Coquitlam of a variety of charities and a large amount of great work on behalf of veterans in particular. On the day the Allied forces invaded Normandy to begin to liberate France from Nazi tyranny more than 70 years ago, Elsley Folds was there, an army medic. Months later, as Holland was liberated, Elsley Folds was there. And it was there in Holland that he met a young lady named Yeti. They fell in love, and as wedding dresses were in short supply in post-war Holland, her dress was made of parachute silk. They moved back to Canada and eventually settled in Coquitlam to raise their family. This couple has been working tirelessly for veterans and for the community for almost 7 decades. They have long been responsible for the Poppy campaign for the Royal Canadian Legion, Branch 263, in support of important charities. They also work tirelessly to educate new generations on the value of the freedoms that Elsley and so many other soldiers and civilians fought for. 7 decades ago, as these soldiers were preparing to storm a beach in a foreign land on which most of them had never set foot, we can imagine that they hoped only to survive the day. Not to live to a ripe old age, but to survive the day. In February, a few weeks ago, in a hastily convened ceremony at the Legion, the government of France granted Elsley Folds, at the age of 93, with the Legion of Honor, France's highest honor, equivalent to the Order of Canada, for his contributions to the freedom of their country. We can now explain what the hurry was to convene that ceremony. Back in February, this past week, Elsley Folds, at the age of 93, one of our surviving World War II veterans, died this past week. And on behalf of Council, we extend our deep condolences to the family, but also our thanks to the family and to Elsley and Yeti for all of the contributions they've made to Canada, to France, to Holland, and to freedom in this world. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. Our first item on this evening's agenda is a presentation by Dr. Michel Tarko, who's President and CEO of the Justice Institute of British Columbia. I'd like to invite Dr. Tarko to come forward.
Welcome, Dr. Tarko.
Thank you, Mayor Stewart and councillors. It's a real honor and privilege to be here in front of you tonight. My purpose as I look at engagement with our external community is to reach out to the different municipalities in the Lower Mainland as a beginning point. And what I'd like to do is maybe just start with a short video that tells you a little bit more about the Justice Institute of British Columbia, what we've been up to the last 30 years, and then I'll conclude with some closing comments. Thank you.
Justice Institute of British Columbia fulfills a vital role, providing innovative education, training, and applied research to keep communities safe. Every year, more than 34,000 students take our rigorous programs and courses or complete customized training in public safety. On our 7 BC campuses, face-to-face or through technology-enabled online learning in communities around the province, across Canada and the world, our students learn from expert instructors who are active in their professional fields.
One of the secrets of training public safety professionals is that you have to use scenarios. You have to experience it to understand the interplay, dealing with the public, dealing with a patient, dealing with individuals in stressful situations.
But the benefit of applied research is that it's real, it's practical, it's hands-on, and it can really improve current practice.
That real-life simulation training was very beneficial to me when I got to my workplace. It was a key to my success.
So when the day comes that our graduates are needed in the community, they're ready.
You get the opportunity of actually applying what you're learning and asking questions, which gives you just a whole different meaning to what you're doing.
Since JIBC was founded as a public post-secondary institution in 1978, we have grown and evolved. JIBC provides world-class police, corrections, sheriffs, paramedic, and firefighting education and training. And we do much more in areas such as emergency management, conflict resolution, Aboriginal studies, and driver training.
As an instructor, when I come in, if something's going on out there that's different than what we're teaching in the program, the Justice Institute of BC is willing to change that program to meet the needs of the workers out in the field.
We have excellent quality in terms of teachers, and they're doing research, they are practicing at the same time.
It really connects, with your instructors. They're approachable, they're intelligent, and they'll work really, really hard to make sure that your needs are put first and you're going to get to where you want to go.
Our programs lead to certificates, diplomas, bachelor's degrees, and graduate credentials. What's most important is our graduates make a difference every day.
So being a paramedic is an extremely rewarding and exciting experience. You really get to get in there, help some people on possibly the worst day of their lives, and really make a change.
Myself, I want to make a difference. I want to make a difference in the families I work with, the communities, and the youth.
I consider myself a lifelong learner. I think it's really important to continue your professional development, and JIBC offers that for me.
I've never found a place that is more understanding and willing to support you in your education goals and in your career goals.
The feeling of accomplishment after you complete the course is, amazing. You really feel like you've done something.
You're going to get the education with academics, you're going to get the education with scenarios, and you're going to get it from people who practice it in the field, do it for real life, and do it today, so that when you come out tomorrow, you're going to be confident in your ability.
JIBC, Canada's leading public safety educator. Go to www.jibc.ca to learn more.
So like any video, this was created about 1.5 years ago, and so of course things have changed already for the Institute in that short time. You heard that in the video we have 34,000 students who engage with the Institute on an annual basis. That reflects our head count. And so what that means is, that's how many people come through the Institute on a regular basis. Our actual full-time equivalency in terms of students is closer to 3,000 per year. And the way that the government counts an FTE is somebody who starts in September and leaves in April with either a certificate, a diploma, or a bachelor's degree. And so that variance between FTEs at 3,000 and our headcount at 30,000 or 34,000 really reflects all of the short-term courses and programs that we offer that in the traditional model of public post-secondary would come under continuing education or continuing studies. And so my purpose in being here today is to just signal to Council and the City of Coquitlam that we're here, we're interested in being a solution to what your priorities are as it relates to public safety. We're always looking at partnerships, whether or not that be with community colleges in the regions that we don't have campuses, and or with other organizations and industry. A good example in my mind would be the work that we're doing in the space of emergency management and security management. We offer a variety of training programs, short-day courses to help businesses and industries, for example, if they don't have a business continuity plan, to develop that and also exercise that plan. We live in a region that we know that there will be, critical incidents that will happen, man-made or otherwise, and so we want to be a part of that solution in supporting communities where business and industry can thrive. Since the video was constructed, the space that we didn't talk about in the video that you didn't hear about is the space of intelligence analysis. And that's a new program for the Institute in the last 3 years, where we're offering a graduate certificate in intelligence analysis with 2 concentrations to date. One is in the space of business intelligence, and that's really supporting the banking and insurance financial sector, and the other concentration is in tactical crime. We've got strong support from CSIS, CBSA, RCMP, and we're also working with the military in terms of what that looks like around helping prepare analysts for the future, analysts who will filter data for decision makers in terms of policy directions. Our partner school is Mercyhurst University out of Erie, Pennsylvania, where our graduates can go on to complete their 2nd year, which leads to a Master's of Science in Intelligence Analysis. All of the courses are online. All our faculty are across the country and are experts in this space. We're also working with Canterbury Christchurch University out of the United Kingdom, where they have a specialization in cybercrime and financial money laundering. And so we're working with them to develop that as a 3rd concentration as we build that program. We're the only program in Canada of this kind, and just want to share that good news with you. Beyond that, as I said, where we don't have campuses, we have partnerships with community colleges who have a regional mandate. With our provincial mandate, we do have campuses in Victoria, in Kelowna, Chilliwack, Maple Ridge, Pitt Meadows, and Douglas is just down the street. So, I mean, any opportunities that we have to support what your municipal needs are, you know, we're happy to step forward. I'd be happy to take any questions if there are any, and I want to say thank you, Mayor and Council, for having some time today on your agenda.
Okay, so the crime analyst that we hear about all the time from, well, the RCMP here, but other police forces, that is you? That is your training, or is it training?
We are offering a certificate in intelligence analysis, and so part of that is training analysts who often could be civilian to work with law enforcement agencies. Okay. So this would be the civilian role, not to say that folks in law enforcement aren't eligible to participate in that training or programming. Certainly we do.
Okay, but these aren't gun-toting folks. These are actual civilian support positions. Correct. That would work with the intelligence that's been gathered.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. Cool. And I'd like to say that, I mean, we're working with PRTC in Chilliwack to find ways that we can be more efficient when we look at advanced police training. We've done a couple of pilots with PRTC as it relates to looking at shared curriculum. It doesn't make sense if we have the same learning outcomes that a course is offered in Chilliwack and another one is in New Westminster and the classes aren't full. So we've done a couple of pilots with PRTC out in Chilliwack, whether or not it relates to advanced policing and surveillance, where we have RCMP and municipal officers either co-teaching or teaching each other.
Okay, and on another subject then, on cybercrime, how you folks out of your institute obviously are going to be up to date. How do we get the rest of policing to be as up to date as those fresh folks, or do we just have to hire more?
My hunch, this isn't my specialization, but we're preparing analysts who may be employed by departments. So they may not be law enforcement personnel themselves, but they're in support of law enforcement.
Okay. Anybody else? Thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
Our second item is the minutes of the regular council meeting held on Monday, March 2nd. Recommendation to approve.
Moved by Councillor Asmussen, seconded by Councillor O'Neill. All in favour? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 3 is a recommendation from the council and committee meeting held on Monday, March 2nd concerning the Terry Fox Foundation 35th anniversary celebration. The committee's recommendations that council endorse the Terry Fox 35th anniversary training run route.
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Asmussen, second by Councillor Hodge. All in favour? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 4 is the minutes of the Universal Accessibility Advisory Committee meeting.
Actually, make sure we invite everybody out to the 35th anniversary celebrations related to the, this is the 10-mile training run on March 2nd. Or no, sorry, it's on What date is it? April 4th. So it's a month away, less than a month away. It's going to be an absolutely great celebration of Terry Fox, one of our local heroes. So look for notices in the newspaper and in social media. Sorry, Mr. Clerk.
Those are appropriate comments. Item 4 is the minutes of the Universal Accessibility Advisory Committee meeting of Tuesday, March 3rd. Recommendations to receive those minutes.
Moved by Councillor Hodge, second by Councillor Towner. All in favour? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
First item of business arising out of that committee's meeting concerns an update on an affordable housing project. The committee's recommendations that the Housing Affordability Strategy Framework be reviewed by the Economic Development Advisory Committee for their feedback and input.
Moved by Councillor O'Neill, second by Councillor Hodge. I actually have some, this is an unusual circumstance in which a committee is asking council to direct that another committee review a third committee's work. I don't see anybody ready to speak to it, though, so slightly unusual. All in favour? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Second item of business arising out of that committee's meeting concerns the Universal Accessibility Advisory Committee's 2015 work plan. The committee's recommendations that Council approve the 2015 work plan.
Normally let the chair move these things, but moved by Councillor Hodge, seconded by Councillor Cirillo. Anybody else? No. All in favour? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Third item of business arising out of this committee's meeting concerns the committee's recommendation that Universal Accessibility Advisory Committee member be appointed as a committee liaison to the Coquitlam 125th Anniversary Steering Task Force.
Sorry, it was moved by Councillor Cirillo, seconded by Councillor Hodge. Councillor O'Neill.
Yeah, don't know exactly what this means as a liaison to the committee. Are they intending that this person sits in on a regular basis as an observer or becomes a voting member of the task force? And if it's the latter, there's some further questions there. But if it's as a liaison to sit in on the task force and report back to the Universal Accessibility Advisory, I've got no real questions about that, but I think there are questions that flow from the second one if it's becoming a new voting member. So perhaps there's the committee chair could elaborate on what is meant by liaison.
Oops, just a second. Just a second. You'll activate. We'll activate Councillor Cirillo's mic. There you go. Councillor Cirillo.
The committee was concerned that they wanted to make sure that the event would be fully accessible and that they would get their input before, as early in the process as possible. So I'm not sure that they want to be a voting member. It's more that they'd like to be involved to put any of their suggestions forward to make sure that it's not reactionary but proactive accommodation for accessibility.
Thank you for the explanation. And Mr. Chair, I'm wondering if you can ask the appropriate person on staff who's in charge of this task force if this is doable, this would not interrupt their plans, or I don't think it would. If it's just somebody to give information as not a voting member, I don't see any problem there, but I just want to make sure that we're not doing something that throws a wrench into the gears somehow. I don't think it would, but is there somebody on staff?
Well, ask for clarification at the beginning then. The meetings that this delegate would be attending are public meetings. So
the vast majority are public meetings.
Yeah.
All are, as far as I know, but I can't say that 100%.
Okay, and I don't think this motion is intended to include them in meetings that by statute or whatever other reason have to be enclosed. So I suspect that they can attend. Even if we don't pass this, they can attend and be dialogue back and forth, but this establishes some kind of a physical connection. Is that right? Good. So I'll go straight to Mr. Alloway. I was just buying him some time as he was trying to figure out what to say, I think.
Thank you, Your Worship. No, I don't see any reason that member could be in attendance in any event. With the direction of council, this is absolutely acceptable to us.
Oh, good then. And I've got no problem. As a matter of fact, I'm enthusiastic about this. I think it's a very good idea to have somebody from this advisory group take part in the 125th to ensure that universal accessibility does take place. Thank you.
Okay. Nothing else? The motion is the recommendation of a liaison member to 125. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 5 is minutes of the Coquitlam 125th Anniversary Steering Task Force meeting of Wednesday, March 4th. Recommendations to receive those minutes.
Moved by Councillor Hodge, second by Councillor Wilson. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 6 is minutes to the Maillardville Commercial and Cultural Revitalization Advisory Committee meeting of Thursday, March 5th. Recommendation to receive those minutes.
Moved by Councillor Wilson, second by Councillor Hodge. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item of business arising out of that committee's meeting concerns the committee's 2015 work plan. The committee's recommendation is that the Maillardville Commercial and Cultural Revitalization Advisory Committee's 2015 work plan, which is attached to the minutes, be approved.
Moved by Councillor Wilson, second by Councillor Hodge. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 7 concerns the minutes of the Tri-Cities Homelessness and Housing Task Group meeting of Friday, March 6th. Recommendation from staff is that these minutes be received.
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Towner, second by Councillor Wilson. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 8 concerns bylaws for final adoption. These are the fourth and final reading of the 2015 5-year financial plan and capital program bylaws. Staff recommendation is that Council give fourth and final reading to City of Coquitlam 2015 5-year financial plan bylaw number 4545. Fourth and final reading to City of Coquitlam drainage development cost charge reserve fund expenditure bylaw number 4526. Fourth and final reading to City of Coquitlam sewer development cost charge reserve fund expenditure bylaw 4525. Fourth and final reading, City of Coquitlam Water Development Cost Charge Reserve Fund Expenditure Bylaw 4524. Fourth and final reading, to City of Coquitlam Transportation Development Cost Charge Reserve Fund Expenditure Bylaw 4521. Fourth and final reading, to City of Coquitlam Parkland Improvement Development Cost Charge Reserve Fund Expenditure Bylaw 4523. And fourth and final reading, to City of Coquitlam Development Cost Charge Amendment Bylaw number 4544.
Move recommendations.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Asmussen, second by Councillor O'Neill. Seconded loudly by Councillor O'Neill.
Thank you very much. So there was a lot of discussion about this at the first three readings. And going through my notes and...
we shouldn't have to discuss it again. Yes. Go ahead.
We forgot to discuss one thing. There was something here I want to drop, and it's something that whether you've been on council for a few months, a little more than a year, 3 years and a bit, or 6 to 9 years, 12 years, how many years? Anyway, it's something we've all worked for, and that's to try to help out, to try to bring down the amount of taxes that the business community is paying. It's all out of proportion. We know that. We've done the tax shift every year. And that seems to be bearing fruit. And I draw people's attention to the bylaw itself that's attached to this report. Schedule B, the second page of Schedule B, looks at the property tax revenue percentage by class. And this shows a very interesting bar graph. And it shows that the percentage of property tax revenue that we are getting from residential is going up, and the percentage from commercial is going down. Very clear. It's a message I think we need to send to the business community, because we hear complaints from the business community that we are working to change the balance, and what we're doing is having some effect. Now, I would think that this bar reflects two two facts. One is the ongoing tax shift, which has been a 1-point tax shift. And the second is that there's simply more growth in residential than there is in commercial, so we're naturally going to be getting more money. So it may well be, even without the tax shift, that the percent would be that we're getting from residential would be rising a bit, and the percent that we're getting from commercial would be declining a bit. But that, in conjunction with the tax shift, sees, it's quite noticeable change, and I think that's the direction we want to keep moving in, and it's good news for a healthier balance in our community. And a healthy balance doesn't help just the commercial base, but it helps the whole community. I think when we have more businesses that find it more business friendly to set up shop in Coquitlam, that helps the business community, of course, but it also helps all the residents and community. So everybody benefits from this better balance that we are aiming for. So it's a good news thing. It's something that this graph was here a few weeks ago when we passed the first 3 readings. We didn't talk about it, but I wanted to take this time now to draw people's attention to it. Thank you.
Thank you. The question is fourth and final. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. And that marks the first time in a decade that this council has passed its budget unanimously. And I want to thank council for all the hard work that they've done on that. I want to, if I had champagne, I'd pop champagne over to the Director of Finance, because she and her team have done a tremendous job, as have all of the departments, in putting together what I think is an outstanding city budget. On behalf of all of us, thank you. Yes, it would. Mr. Clerk.
I think what Councillor O'Neill said was.
That's right.
Item 9 is fourth and final reading of proposed highway dedication cancellation adjacent to 1838 and 1880 Lemax Avenue, 579 Ascot, and 584 Linton. This is bylaw number 4478. Staff recommendations that council give fourth and final reading to City of Coquitlam highway dedication cancellation bylaw number 4478.
Oh dear. Moved by Councillor Hodge, second by Councillor O'Neill. Councillor Zrillo.
I just had a question about this one in relation to any other street changes that might be coming on around this area. Do we anticipate any street changes that would change the flow of walking traffic or vehicle traffic around this area, just from Linton, Lemax, and I think it's Laurentian at the other side? Do we anticipate any changes?
Mr. McIntyre. Or no.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship, and good evening, Mayor and Council, and perhaps if Joseph wants to weigh in as well. We had looked at this, because it's a bit of a redundant piece of public right-of-way right now, and one of the considerations, I think, in our planning staff and discussing with transportation planning staff was, how does this fit in the overall movement of pedestrians in the area? And it didn't seem to be a necessary link or pathway for that. I'm sure that when they looked at this, these existing rights-of-way here, that would have been done with what also might be on the books or in planning for other network needs and improvements in the area. So I don't believe so, but if Joseph has any other further information on that, he could certainly comment.
Through your worship, as Mr. McIntyre mentioned, transportation planning has reviewed this application previously. We compared it to the council-approved strategic transportation plan. We looked at the network, and the final result was that because of redundancy in the neighborhood, we didn't see the specific need for this particular right-of-way.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. That was Mr. Jim McIntyre and Mr. Joseph Diozegi. Any other discussion on this item? It's fourth and final reading of Lane We Don't Need No More. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Next item, item 10, is consideration of fourth and final reading of official community plan amendment bylaw number 4537 and zoning amendment bylaw number 4538. This is for a proposed subdivision in the 3500 block of Sheffield Avenue. Staff recommendations that Council give fourth and final reading to City of Coquitlam Official Community Plan Amendment Bylaw number 4537 and fourth and final reading to City of Coquitlam Zoning Amendment Bylaw 4538.
So moved. Moved by Councillor Asmundson, second by Councillor O'Neill. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 11 is consideration of fourth and final reading of rezoning amendment bylaw number 4518 and the development permit for 563 to 609 Cottonwood Avenue and 612 to 614 Vanessa Court. Staff recommendations that Council give fourth and final reading to City of Coquitlam zoning amendment bylaw number 4518 and approve the signing and sealing of the related DP 4563 to 609 Cottonwood Avenue and 612 to 614 Vanessa Court, and that the Mayor and City Clerk be authorized to execute it.
So moved.
Second. Moved by Councillor O'Neill, second by Councillor Marsden. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. No. Oops, sorry. Councillor Zerillo was opposed. Carried almost unanimously.
Next item, item 12, is zoning amendment bylaw number 4533 for a proposed subdivision at 1243 Wellington Street. Staff recommendations that Council give first reading to City of Coquitlam zoning amendment bylaw number 4533 and that bylaw number 4533 be referred to public hearing.
Second. Moved by Councillor Reid, second by Councillor Hodge. Councillor O'Neill.
I just had a question about the lot that's directly south, 1237 Wellington, I believe it is, and whether or not there are any plans in the work for that. This is sort of developing half of it looks like it's going to be a cul-de-sac here, and it doesn't really impact on this particular land use, but I'm just interested in knowing if there's anything else coming down that we should be aware of for the second half of the cul-de-sac here, the southern half.
Is the second half compatible with the first half? Mr. Johansson.
Your Worship, yes, it is. That particular property owner is not moving ahead at this time, but the subdivision will allow for the completion of the half-road cul-de-sac and a lotting pattern similar to what is being proposed today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. It's first reading and a public hearing. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 13 is a subdivision and development servicing amendment bylaw number 4494. Staff recommendations that Council give first, second, and third readings to City of Coquitlam subdivision and development servicing amendment bylaw number 4494.
Moved by Councillor Atkinson, second by Councillor Hodge. Councillor Reid.
Thank you. Through you to engineering. I like having, obviously, the bylaws in place, and when people come in, they can go to the desk and find out all the things they're supposed to do or not supposed to do. But how often do we upgrade this with the latest innovations? I know in the last few years, especially since you've been here, we've had a couple of sections looking at new types of concrete, and I think we're always looking for new types of paving and lighting and all that. So what I'm always afraid of when I go into something like this is that it sort of becomes, shall I say, the Bible, and no one will look any further or address any new innovations that come up. So that question, and also the specifications, how often do we update the specs?
Mr. Diozegi.
Through your worship, this is, as we see it, in the Engineering and Public Works Department as well as with the Planning Department, it's a working document that both staff and developers and others have to use regularly. There is a practical limit to how often we want to change the bylaw, but and so because of that, the actual bylaw amendments don't happen as frequently as the actual changes. But before we would make the bylaw changes, typically what we do is we look at best practices, we learn from the industry, we evaluate whether certain new materials, methods, standards would be suitable for implementation in the city of Coquitlam. And if they are, then we typically would consult with the industry, and if we have an opportunity, we would actually test it for a period of time. So because of the time involved in these bylaw changes, it's not desirable to make bylaw changes more often than about once in every 3 years or so. We are also influenced by some external factors, like many of our standards, which are to a degree reflected in the current bylaw and some other relevant bylaws, impacted by the MMCD construction manual standards, which have a different cycle length, but from time to time we have to implement those as well.
So if someone comes in 3 years from now with some new product or new innovation, we wouldn't necessarily just turn them down because they didn't meet these specs. Is that correct?
No, we would not turn them down. We do have the discretion of entertaining newer materials. The prime example of recent one, Council is very well aware of, the reflective paving section on Mariner Way.
Yeah.
This is certainly not governed by the bylaw, but because of the benefits, what we looked at, we were prepared to test it.
Okay, as long as I get all the newest and latest, I'm happy. Thank you.
What's a guy to do? New isn't always better, you know. Sometimes old is never mind. Councillor O'Neill.
Thank you. And what makes me happy is knowing that we've properly consulted and fully consulted before moving ahead with this. And I see on page 3 that we certainly had good internal cross-pollination going on here between engineering, public works, planning and development, parks, rec and culture, fire rescue, all of that stuff. And there was also consultation with the Urban Development Institute, as well as a number of reports to council. So with the Urban Development Institute, now quite often when we see changes going forward, that there's a letter from the UDI or a letter from the Home Builders Association attached to a report saying they like this, this and that, and they're happy with the consultation. I didn't see it here, and I just want to make sure that they've been fully briefed on all of this, that they're on board, or do they have some couple little quibbles? And if they have the quibbles, I'd like to know what they are. I'm wondering, Mr. Mayor, if anyone on staff can perhaps address that question for me.
Does anyone want to address the question of quibbles? Carl.
Yes, sir.
Carl on quibbles.
Mr. Worship, through to Councillor O'Neill. I wasn't in this role when it came to UDI, but I was at those meetings and reviewed the minutes as well. And my understanding is that UDI was in support of these changes. One thing that these the multimodal standards coming in, there's been a lot of consultations, come to council a few times, and bringing these forward in the bylaw will help create certainty in terms of what is identified in a neighborhood plan, like say for a community collector, then developers can take a look at that and say, okay, this is what I need to bring forward. It really helps to speed process up and clarify things. And my understanding is that there were some concerns in some cases about additional dedications, but there's been some changes to the zoning bylaw that have come forward that allow for the original site area to be included in density calculations.
I'm wondering if, thank you for that, and I'm wondering if the UDI or any other industry group has been involved. Has there been any formal communication or anything on record that says, yes, we're on board, this is all good stuff, we want to go ahead with it? And if so, if we could see that at fourth reading, or whether has it all been sort of more unofficial? Has there been any letter or anything like that that thanks the city for inviting them to participate and summarizing what they've agreed to?
Your Worship, if I could perhaps, and Carl's described how staff consulted at various points with UDI, and maybe what was said was that there's a UDI, Urban Development Institute, liaison committee, and we meet roughly 3-4 times a year. So the agendas of those meetings are items that they bring forward, plus projects or draft policy work that the city's working on. So we've been through those sessions there that between transportation, planning staff and engineering staff and planning staff, we would have made presentations to the group, likely about the road sections and that, and had a discussion and feedback at those sessions. So they went there twice. I think it was highlighted first, maybe there were some questions, and they reported back. In other instances where we're working on specific policy pieces, density bonusing, neighborhood plans, where there's actually a body of material that may be referred out in draft, and there's more of an active dialogue on the specifics of that policy, that draft policy, we'll then see a letter back. I think in this case here, the UDI Liaison Committee, it's a very useful, very productive forum for those sort of discussions and feedback. We don't always have things formalized by letter, but I think in this case here, that's probably the process that was taken.
Okay, so I guess, did they, okay, here's another question. Have they seen the exact final form of this bylaw? It was developed in conjunction with liaisons with them, but have they seen the final bylaw, and have they gone through it and they've signed off on it? Have they said, yes, it's fine except for this, or yes, it's totally fine? Have they seen the final bylaw as proposed that we have in front of us here?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. The UDI were involved with, more specifically, the streetscape standard and the multimodal aspects of the bylaw update. There's a number of housekeeping and other cleanup type items that are included with this bylaw amendment, so they wouldn't have seen every bylaw amendment that's being put forward to Council tonight. But as far as this overall streetscape standard updates, they were involved with that review and providing input back to staff.
Well, I feel that to do my job, one of the things I should be doing here is maybe phoning up the UDI to make sure they've seen this whole thing in its final form, and if they're checking off on it. They're the people that are going to have to implement so much of this, the builders, and I want to make sure that they know exactly what's coming. I just don't have that satisfaction right now. I'm sorry. So I'm going to have to call them myself. Thank you.
Mr. Diozegi, did you have anything you wanted to add at some point there?
Thank you, Your Worship. I personally addressed the liaison committee at least twice over the last couple of years on this issue, particularly from the multimodal perspective. I'm well aware of their initial concerns, and as we worked on these bylaw amendments relevant to the multimodal transportation issues, we addressed their concerns and reported back to the liaison committee. It was about 4 months ago, I believe, when I met with the committee, and this was one of the brief items on the list where I advised them that we actually at that point already had the revised cross-sections, which I felt was appropriately addressing their issues. And I also told them that I myself needed to take one more look at to make sure that from both the development planning and from the engineering perspective, the documentation is adequate. And I'm satisfied that at this point it is. In addition to, I'd like to mention that we often consult as a local government staff with a variety of entities, be it a citizen, a group of citizens, neighborhood associations, industry representatives, be it UDI or the Chamber of Commerce, but we typically do not seek their explicit endorsement of what we are doing. They are not an approving body, but certainly their input is very important to us. We take it into consideration, and whenever we can, we address it to the maximum. Thank you.
It's okay with you. Okay, Councillor Towner.
Thank you. The issues associated with school traffic safety don't seem to be specifically addressed, and I'm just wondering if there's any specific requirements to deal with the school zone areas, such as curve bulges and whatnot.
Mr.
For your worship, the subject bylaw is not specifically tailored for school zones, although there are some elements which are definitely useful. As you see in the attached new standard set of drawings, curb bulges are included with dimensions. You could see also the wheelchair let-downs, the various accessibility options at a variety of intersections depending on the road width and the classification of the road. The biggest achievement, I think, of this bylaw in that respect is that we are changing the current minimum of 1.2 meter sidewalk width to a much safer minimum of 1.5 meter width. And generally, the intent behind the current bylaw changes are a clear reflection of providing more support to multimodal transportation, including obviously pedestrians and cyclists. Now, beyond that, as Council knows very well, we have a number of programs working with the schools and other agencies to make sure that children and others can get in a more safe way to their destination, but that's not regulated by this particular bylaw change.
Thank you.
Yep. Are there different so the road cross sections aren't different necessarily in school zones, or we deal with them site specific with staffing?
That is correct. We have standard drawings here. They are no different from anywhere else, but usually what we have a whole selection of sections that we can use depending on where they is deemed to be appropriate.
Yep. Councillor Wilson.
Thanks. Just had a couple questions. One, the two cities that we compared to, Surrey and Richmond, what we're proposing is narrower than what they have, according to page 5. Were those two cities picked at random? How do we compare to other cities? Are we following best practices, or are they? Just kind of curious. Just seemed odd that the two we picked, we were narrower than.
This is actually a very complex question. We have obviously almost 2 dozens of local governments in our region, but we at the time looked at several of them, what kind of cross sections they had. But for all practical purposes, because the very broad variety of sections we found, we picked these two cities because there was some relevance to Coquitlam, what they had and what we are proposing. When we are looking at the typical cross sections, either the best practices or standards that govern us, those are more related to components of what we try to put in within the road right-of-way, such as the lane width for traveling lanes, lane widths for parking lanes, bicycle lanes. In some instances, for the purpose of separation, boulevard widths information is broadly available, and of course, information for sidewalk widths. The rest comes from the needs of accommodating a whole variety of utilities, be it municipally owned and operated or telecommunication or hydroelectric equipment. But when we put everything together, we have to realize that we are dealing with some significant land values here. So we have to find a reasonable balance that all that thing what we have to put in we can put in the most efficient way, possibly within the narrowest right-of-way. And that's where the consultation in part is very helpful with UDI. as well as with the utility companies. So in short, the two different examples we used in the council report were just a demonstration that you can put in broader curb-to-curb paved width and they work. We chose to put in narrower, and the same can apply for the right-of-way width.
In your opinion, though, the fact that it's narrower doesn't mean it's less safe?
We have a number of cross-sections, and with this new set of cross-sections, we go beyond just the more simplistic road classification of local collector and arterial roadways. What we are doing is we are trying to make a stronger tie between the adjacent land use and the road cross-section. So I have a fair degree of comfort that with the variety of cross-sections within each of these categories, whether we have really good options available for arterials, for collectors, and local roads. So as long as we select the appropriate sub-cross-section, if you like, that's appropriate for the adjacent land use, then yes, I'm comfortable that it's going to be safer.
And would that selection be negotiated with a developer, or would that be mandated by the engineering
No,
department?
it's not going to be negotiated with the land developer. That would create something that would be entirely uncontrollable. What we do is, working closely with the planning department, essentially the land use is determined by the official community plan, and then within that we have the area plans and the neighborhood plans. And if you look at the designation of the certain areas, that should tell you which one is the most appropriate cross-section to use.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Zerillo.
Thank you. Well, I have to say I'm really happy about the wider sidewalks. I think that was for the lower density. We even have even wider, correct me if I'm wrong, even wider in the higher density. The sidewalk's going to be even a little bit wider. So I am really pleased about that. And my notes here are that we really need to get Coquitlam right. So Coquitlam's one of our flattest areas. I'm visualizing in my mind there's going to be a lot of bike, a lot of walking, a lot of multimodal use if we do it right. So I'm really pleased about that, and I just wanted to mention, and I did mention earlier today, on the multimodal paths, and we have a little bit wider sidewalks, if there's something we could do around the bus stop visibility. I noticed I was coming up Mariner again yesterday in the dark, and as I came around one of the corners, there's a pedestrian or a person waiting for a bus, and it's dark, and there's no reflectors, and they're not wearing reflectors, and I'm just wondering if there's a way for us to enhance poles, maybe on some of the higher traffic roads, enhance the bus stop pole, not just the reflector at the top, but a reflector of the pole. Is that something that we could do, or could be part of our general housekeeping items here?
Certainly we can address this issue. There are reflective tapes available that for select locations we can actually put on the bus stop sign posts for better visibility during the day and during the night. These are fairly common in some municipalities. Versions of them are available for pedestrian crossings, particularly in school zones. So we'll look into it.
Yes, thank you very much. And then I had one other that really piqued my interest, which was under road design criteria number 2, road design speed. And I was wondering, is assigning speed limits something that the municipality can do?
Through your worship, I'd like to highlight the differences between the design speed limit and the posted speed limit. This can be relevant not on a level, straight road section typically, but more so when there are hills or curvy sections of the roadway. And usually, especially in suburban areas, and of course outside of the urban areas, the design speed is typically greater than the posted speed limit. In other words, you can have 130 km per hour or 110 km per hour speed limit, yet the posted speed could be only like 80 or 90 km per hour, whatever is suitable for the general traffic conditions. In urban areas, this can be a practical issue when we have hillsides to develop, or the road network is not in a grid, and these are all challenges that can be addressed first selecting the appropriate design speed and then selecting the appropriate posted speed limit. In an urban area, typically the desirable design speed is not that much different from the posted or bylaw regulated speed limit, but you have to be very careful that if you have, say, a posted 30 km per hour limit, then 100 km per hour design speed is not necessarily the best thing.
Thank you for clarifying that, because actually that makes sense now that you're saying that, is that you want to make sure that you can travel faster than the speed limit because somebody's going to safely. Okay. So I think that's basically it, but I just wanted to say I did note on page 5 that you did mention that you're working right now on that balance between developers that want to get the most value out of the property, developing it to the most they can, and that we are going to be asking for additional right-of-ways for sidewalk and roads. So I just want to congratulate you on finding that balance, and I'm really happy about the wider sidewalks, and if we could get those bus stop painted, that would be awesome. Thank you.
There you go. Sufficient input. We're at first, second, third reading of the Subdivision Development Servicing Amendment Bylaw. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
The next item, item 14, concerns the Park Recreation and Culture Master Plan. This is the public consultation summary and implementation strategy. Staff recommendation is to receive the report, to endorse the final draft PRC Master Plan, which is attachment 2 to the report, and direct staff to proceed with completion of the PRC Master Plan implementation strategy and present this to Council for consideration in late 2015 along with the final Master Plan.
Now, a member of Council has asked that we divide this, but we'll accept a motion to we'll accept a motion on all three, and we'll vote on them separately.
Like to move separation?
Well, they're not on the floor yet, so we'll accept a motion of all three. Okay. Does anyone?
Second.
Moved by Councillor O'Neill, second by Councillor Asmundson. We're now dividing them. Okay. So on item number 1, Councillor Hodge.
I'd like to move separation on this, please.
Sure, already.
That it has. That's
yep.
done. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Well, I guess motion to accept recommendation number 1 and
it's on the floor already.
Okay.
So do you have any?
Well, I've just my concern is with recommendation number 2. Do you want to do 1, 2, and 3 individually? Because I'd like to move that we defer endorsement of the final draft back to committee.
Okay. So we're on item number 1. Are there any comments on item number 1? All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Councillor Hodge.
Okay, I'd like to move that we send the Master Parks Plan back for committee for discussion at committee.
Second. Okay, this would be going back to committee of the whole. That's all of council. Moved by Councillor Hodge, seconded by Councillor Asmundson to refer it back to committee of the whole. Council in committee, rather. Any discussion on that? All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. On recommendation number 3, direct staff to proceed with completion of the implementation strategy. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Obviously, we'll have a discussion at some point in the future at council and committee related to the bulk of the detail in the master plan draft.
Yes, Your Worship. Referral to CIC means it will appear on the April 13th agenda of that committee meeting.
Thank you.
Item 15 pertains to the arena services and facilities strategy. Staff recommendations that Council approve the completion of arena services and facilities strategy based on the terms of reference in attachment 1 of the report.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Morrison, second by Councillor Asmundson. Surely we have enough arenas, don't we? Councillor O'Neill. I was only joking. Councillor O'Neill.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, I'd like to see this go forward, but I think we need to refine the define here, refine the definition. We seem to be treating arena as another word for ice surface. And I think we need to be very specific here about whether we're looking for, whether we need more arenas, whether we need more dry floor, whether we need more ice surface, and we have to be very specific about that. An arena is not necessarily one with an ice surface, and an arena, by definition, is a covered space with place for spectators to watch. Is that what we're talking about when we're talking about arenas, or do you actually mean we're talking about ice rinks? So,
Councillor O'Neill, this is not the right arena for a debate about that kind of semantic.
It is, and you know it is. You're skating on thin ice.
Rank it up, rank it up.
Anyway, so reading through the terms of reference, which is attachment 1, especially the first page, they just rung all sorts of alarm bells because we seem to be interchanging ice surface with arena. And then, of course, we have the second bullet that says the city has not added any new indoor arenas since 1972. Well, actually, the Poirier dry floor is an arena, okay? So we have. So we can't make these assertions. We're going to be opening the door to some confusion here, I think. We have to be very clear about what we're asking for, or else we're going to get back kind of a mishmash. I'm afraid we'd get back a mishmashy report. So we have to be, anyway, so I can't say it any other way that ice arena, ice surface, they're not interchangeable. They are different things. So what is the response, Mr. Mayor, you think to that? What's your response, personally?
My response is that perhaps the word rink carries enough of this, I guess, definitiveness that you're looking for to determine that we're not talking about. I think the average person thinks of an arena as an ice arena in Canada, but I accept that in the rest of the world, the Colosseum in Rome is an arena, and it never really had ice.
We're operating in a political arena right now, as a matter of fact. So, this is not a quibble. This is important because it could lead to some real.
So it may well be that ice rink is what we meant. Rink surface.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay, so I don't think we should approve these terms of references until this is rewritten.
Mr. Alway.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. That's good comments. I do appreciate the distinction. Typically, arena space is associated with ice rinks, and much of the terms of reference talks about ice rink. Many of our ice rinks convert to dry floor, and so really we're talking about sport rinks, which can be both ice and dry floor. So yes, I take the comments very directly, and we are serious about making those distinctions. Some services that the city uses today, like Planet Ice, have ice throughout the year. Others convert to dry floor space and are used extensively in the non-ice periods by dry floor sports. So we do recognize the distinction, and we will make a very clear distinction. And if we can take direction from council to distinguish those in an amended final draft, we're happy to do that. Our intent is to look at both of those areas, primarily though related to the ice. It came out of the ice side, but clearly it then helps us on the dry floor side as well. So that is the distinction, if I can make that.
Right, and let's be clear. So maybe we need ice right away. We don't need more year-round dry floor. And that's where I don't think we would have got that level of distinction with these terms of reference. Mr. Chair, there's somebody else in the staff benches there waving his or her hand.
Well, I'll get to her in just a moment, because we may have to revisit the previous item we just gave readings to an approval to an implementation strategy that includes the word arena. So we'll have to revisit that one as well. But
that's one of the things we might talk about at committee.
Michelle.
Yes, through your worship. I just want to draw your attention. In the draft Parks, Recreation and Culture Master Plan, we identify two service areas. One is the arena service area and one is the indoor sports. And so this study is actually supporting the arena services, which we define as the ice arena. And then we have the indoor sports. So when we do the analysis on arenas, we're going to be looking at the sports that play on the ice side of things and not the indoor sports like lacrosse and ball hockey that play on the dry floor surfaces.
When you give this terms of reference to a consultant, and the consultant goes away and studies them very carefully and has to come back for clarification probably, because the consultant may have the same concerns I do, and I would just be much more comfortable if it's very specific in the terms of reference. You can get into trouble. I think we've gotten in trouble before, maybe not with this staff surely, but previous staffs perhaps, and councils without being clear enough in terms of reference. So I'd really be more comfortable if it's really spelled out here, please.
Okay.
So I would move deferral.
I'll second.
Okay, there's a motion to defer, seconded by Councillor Zarillo. On the motion to defer.
Would that, excuse, before we go, yes, on that same motion then, would that make sense, or do we have to actually reject this and then, or direct staff to come back, or would the motion read defer to come back with more refined?
The motion to defer only stops the conversation to a later date. So I normally specify a date that you're deferring it to, or a committee you're referring it to, or staff, or something like that.
Maybe the city clerk could help me
would
here.
rather. Since he's going to have to sort this out.
The chair is correct. A motion to defer would simply move this to the next council meeting, for instance. A motion to refer back to staff to revise certain elements of the report would be what I believe Councillor O'Neill has.
I think that's what I had in mind. I'm sorry about that.
Okay. Okay.
I would motion to refer back to staff.
I just want to be clear here. Well, I don't disagree. The word arena has been used, I think, in place of the word rink. We're talking about rink sports that play on a surface that has rounded corners and looks like a rink, whether it has ice on the bottom or a dry floor on the bottom. And I think that's the challenge, is that some communities don't call it an arena, they call it a rink. If that's, am I capturing closely enough and it's not a semantic objection, I realize it's an actual objection related to the English language. And so I'm trying to figure out the best way to move forward here.
Well, I think from my point of view, I think staff fully understands my point, and I've seen a few nodding heads there. So I think that I think I can trust them to rewrite these terms of reference to be very specific, that we're looking primarily for the ice rink thing, and then secondarily this will also look at general arena dry floor type use, but maybe some definitions up top and be very specific about it. I'd be much more comfortable with it that way. So if staff could do that, and if it won't throw too big of a wrench into the works, I'd be happy with that.
Okay, so I'm looking at attachment 1 to this item. The terms of reference 2.0. Arena services includes ice arena space for programs such as skating, ice hockey, and curling, but also provides space for indoor sports such as lacrosse and ball hockey, obviously when the ice is not there, and other non-sport programming during off-season months. In Coquitlam, ice arena facilities are provided by 2 distinct delivery systems and such. And you're not comfortable simply with the word arena as it's been explained here, in its interpretation as it's been explained here.
Well, I guess it was the whole impact of the whole document, where I thought that it, even with that definition, that I thought it led to too much uncertainty, especially when it said especially with the contradiction between when arena surfaces could be all of these things, but then bullet 2, we've added no new indoor arenas since 1972, when with the broad definition we clearly have added an indoor arena, which is the Poirier Forum. So that's what's... I'm really wanting to make sure this is proper here. Anyways, there we go.
Yep, no, he's still got the floor. The motion on the floor now is to
refer it back to staff to make it crystal clear what we're talking about here.
Okay, now the original motion was to defer. I'll allow that to subside. Yeah. This motion is to refer. Is that seconded?
Yes, she seconded.
Seconded by Councillor Zarrillo. And I'm going to go to a different list. You'll have to activate, please. You can as soon as everyone's had a chance to speak on deferral. On referral, rather. We're on referral at this point. Councillor Hodge, Zarrillo, and Marsden. Councillor Hodge.
On referral. Can we just make an amendment and substitute that wording wherever it says arena? Can we just be specific? Can we just do this as a direction to staff without changing the intent of this? Can we just change for the clarification? I mean, this is the terms of reference for the person that's going to be doing the report. So there will be staff direction along the way as well. So if all we want is at this point for clarification, can we just move that staff make that clarification before it goes out?
Mr. Alweb.
Yes, I mean, just to clarify, the goal of this is ICE services, but ICE services often provide dry floor services, and that's the distinction. And I do take the commentary from Councillor O'Neill. Our goal is to look at the fact that we have a very high capacity and we're near full capacity of our ICE services. Those ICE services, though, provide dry floor capacity. So depending on how we deliver ICE services, there may or may not provide additional capacity for dry floor services, and that's the key here. I take Councillor O'Neill's comments on the Poirier Forum. It's a very unique building. Those don't happen very often. I think the reference was to the ice arena services, which we haven't provided since '72. We certainly would accept Council's direction that we amend the terms of reference as it stands through Council direction to change to ice arena, with some commentary noted here that what we will be looking at is as we look at how we enhance and deliver ICE services, they may provide, and decisions made down the road by Council, they may provide additional capacity for dry floor services. And that was the reference.
So I guess my question is, can we do that, or does it have to, the wording change and then have to come back to us? I guess that'd be to the clerk.
Sure. What I would suggest is if Council provides direction that Council is satisfied with by simply adding as amended in the original recommendation, I think that would allow us to proceed in that manner. But there is a motion to refer on the floor.
You would simply add the words as amended to provide greater clarity that the emphasis of the report will be on ice surfaces.
We'd have to vote against the motion that's before us, and then we could move the amendment to...
Right, a motion to refer is a motion that has precedence over the other.
Right. Okay, and the motion to refer is on the floor. I'm going to do an unusual thing. I'm going to ask Council for a moment of pause. And I'm going to go back to Councillor O'Neill and see if he has a better solution that will allow us to proceed more quickly than this.
Thank you very much. So I'm wondering, where my problem started here was the contradiction between the city adding no new indoor arenas since 1972 and the definition of arenas and background. So I think it all makes sense without that second bullet. If you just take out the city has not added any new indoor arenas since 1972, then the definition makes sense, and then then we're not contradicting ourselves because we've defined already arena as an ice arena that can also be used for non-ice things in the off season. And then it all seems to work there, but it just came to a dead stop with that second bullet. So if we just take the second bullet out, I guess there's no contradiction. And the more I look at this, that's really was where I was being held up. So maybe we can solve this by...
You have an amendment to move.
I don't know what stage we're deep down into this now.
I'm going to rule that the last 5 minutes didn't happen, unless there's an objection. Do you have a motion? Is there
change your amendment?
You can't withdraw. I'm going to move that it's not there, unless there's an objection.
So I'm just going to say I would be happy just to.
Sorry. A second.
Do a new one.
Is there an objection to effectively withdrawing the motion to refer? No objection.
Well, I want to speak to it, but there's other people ahead of me.
You'd be able to speak to, well, if it's withdrawn, we wanted to speak to it, but you'll be able to make those comments in the course of the amendment that I think is coming. Okay. Is that okay? I hear no objection. Councillor O'Neill.
Okay, so that I move then that we amend the terms of reference to remove the second bullet that states the city has not added any new indoor arenas since 1972.
Second. Moved by Councillor O'Neill, seconded by Councillor Asmundson to amend the motion, or the report actually. Okay.
I have no more cues. I have no more cues to give you.
I'm going to clear QB, the Q related to the previous amendment, which was to refer. The new amendments on the floor, you'll have to activate if you want to speak to this amendment. Anybody? Anybody at all? Councillor Zarillo.
Thank you. I did want to speak to it because actually if I look at the letter that came from our Sports Center Users Association, I mean, this is specifically about ice, and it's not necessarily specifically about an arena. It's about ice surface, and there may be other options for ice surface that are artificial ice, some new initiatives where you can do learn to skate on different types of ice. So I really think that this piece of work is going to cost us $70,000, that we should have a very, very clear idea where we're going with this. And in my mind, this was always about ice surface. Whether it's used differently at another time of year, that's fine. But maybe if we tell the consultant that we're interested in maximum ice capacity, that we might get some things that we didn't think of or don't know of. But I'm still of the mind that it should be specifically ice, and that is what we're looking for, and that's what we're paying $70,000 for. Because if they come back and say something about dry floors facility, that has nothing to do with ice. I want to know specifically about ice, and what are my options for ice? And could it be all year long? Could it be real ice, fake ice, powdered ice? I want to know about ice. So I think it was a good, Councillor O'Neill's idea that, we should narrow it down. I think it's a good one. I would hate to spend the money and not have a good answer on the back end. So thank you.
To be clear, we're not considering a powdered ice rink. Councillor Marsden.
Thank you. I think on attachment 1, the scope of services, it very clearly states that we were addressing the current ice capacity challenges. And I would point out to council and staff that under the Canadian Hockey Association rule book, I believe it's rule number 1, it stipulates that the game of hockey is played on a surface of ice that shall be hereto referred to as a rink. I officiated the game for 20 years. I instructed the programs on the rules, and it's required that it be ice. So all due respect to the various other pieces that might be available for training, for our players to actually play in sanctioned games under the Canadian Hockey Association, they require ice. And this survey, or this study, is to ensure that we have adequate capacity for them. So I appreciate Councillor O'Neill's comments and changing to remove the reference to no new arena facilities. But I think we should move forward and get our consultants to work. I believe the terms of reference are clear enough that we're looking for ice capacity and ensure that we've got it available to us. So, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
The only thing I would add to that, too, is by the time this study is complete and any new ice facility is built, we'll definitely need more dry floor space. So I think you get sort of a 2-for-1 out of this, and so I think I appreciate the point Councillor Zarillo makes, but I think but at the same time we are going to need more dry floor space. Thank you.
Councillor Reid on ice. on the question.
Mine is only one, and this is the second report, or probably this is the same one. I'm reading it twice. That says there's been a decline in participation and membership in curling within Coquitlam. And I'm finding that very odd because the population is changing and a lot of seniors like curling, and I've never seen more curling anywhere on TV than I have in the last year or so. Sure. I mean, I just don't get why it's declining, and I wonder if we should do just a relook at that.
This study will be looking at that issue, and we are talking to the our Tri-City partners as well, Port Moody, and their experience with curling also. We are looking at trends, and it will be part of that assessment.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Asmundson.
Well, thank you. I seconded the removal of the one bullet. I think the terms of reference are fairly clear about ICE and the need for ICE. And I think it also what it talks about in terms of reference is partnership and collaboration and current capacity allocation, and just not within the city of Coquitlam, but what about the other cities? What are their capacities? How can we share between the two? Do we all have to be building our separate where there's not being used in other areas? So I think it's important that we get this study and we found out exactly where we're at. What are the needs and how do we fill them, and where should they be filled? So I think it's an important piece of work that needs to be done, and I think the terms of reference for me are fairly quite straightforward and clear, and I think staff have done a good job on that, and I'm looking forward to seeing the results of the report. Thank you.
Yes, we're still on the amendment.
That's right.
Okay. So the amendment, we'll have the clerk read back the amendment.
Sure. The amendment is to remove the second bullet in the terms of reference referencing that no new arenas have been built since 1972. And what we will do is, and I'll say it now, but in terms of a friendly amendment, once we return to the main motion, we will put as amended in the main motion and not require that to be a subject of a second.
Of course. On the amendment, all in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Amended report. Now the main motion.
Yep. Now this is the speakers list on the main motion. It was Councillor O'Neill, but he may be done.
I've got no more to say.
He may be willing to acquiesce.
Thank you very much.
To Councillor Zarillo.
Thank you. So I think I've expressed my concerns about the arena, and I just wanted to clarify: is this arena only for hockey games?
Worship, this isn't about an arena. This is about arena services in the city of Coquitlam in the next 15, 20 years. We currently have ice at Planet Ice. It's our property. Adult ice is offered there. We have ice for learn to skate and learn to play, etc. in our own rinks. Our own rinks convert to dry floor. So we have a certain delivery system currently in ice services. But ice services are also regional in nature, right? So this really is about long-term ice services, but often those ice services offer other benefits, and that's why there's some nuances there. This study will look at the long-term arena services, ice arena services, and then ancillary benefits to the city and how we deliver that service in the long term, including an assessment with our partner government agencies, Port Moody, POCO. We're working with RG Properties. We are looking at the entire landscape of how we deliver and how we govern ice delivery over the next 15, 20 years. So it's not about one arena, it's about arena services generally.
But those arena surfaces, or ice, are they going to be used exclusively for hockey games? Because that's what I'm...
Well, at this point, our current ice arenas are not exclusively for ice hockey. They are for a good part of the year, but other part of the year they're used by trade shows, by ball hockey, by lacrosse, by a number of dry floor sports. So there is a delivery system in place that offers a range of benefits to the community from an ice arena. Yeah. We really have to look at how to maximize the city's investment in long-term investment in ice rink services, either through partnerships like Planet Ice or through direct delivery that maximizes those by broadening the range of uses that can be provided there. So all of those questions will be the focus of this work.
Okay, that's all I just want. I just wanted to make sure that when these terms of reference go to the consultant, it's not all about hockey games, and I mean, we're talking about recreational, learn to skate. Like we got to incorporate everybody. So my note here was just about the fact that, you know, there are so many strategy documents being prepared right now, and I would hate to see the arts and culture one lose priority, because it has been in the works longer than this one. So I'm just putting it out there that I hope the two of them come simultaneously together and that we don't lose one over the other.
You, Councillor Hodge.
Yes, so I'm glad this is coming forward. We are working on the Master Parks, Rec and Culture Plan, and so this is one of those pieces that was identified as missing, something that we've heard a lot about, and the need for more ice. I'm hoping, and again, because staff will be able to give some direction to the consultant during this process, I'm hoping that we will get concrete data here and a blueprint for the future. I want to know numbers. I want to see details in this, because this has been a long time coming. Our sports community and the public who uses the facilities, I think, deserve to know what our plans are for the next couple of years, and what our plans are for 10 years from now as our population grows, as our city grows, and in some cases as different sports emerge. So I want to see that, and I want to also look at, you know, what our opportunities are for different types of delivery through partnerships. And by partnerships, I mean possibly with our neighboring communities, partnerships with the private sector, which much as the agreement we have now, you know, locations, and also we've had a discussion about whether or not this is just about ice. But reading the the draft of the master plan, one of the things that comes through in that report is the need to do joint facilities, and whether or not there's opportunities to construct a new ice facility, whether it's arena with seats, whether it's just practice, but maybe there's the potential to build it next to a pool to share energy, or the potential to put it next to a gymnasium, because we know we have gymnasium, or to a dry floor facility. So I don't want to limit it just to ice, because I think what we have to do is look at this in a broader context, because that's what we're hearing through about, you know, as we move forward with that master plan. On the subject of partnerships, we have a really good arrangement right now with Planet Ice. I mean, you know, I think it's an arrangement we've had for years. There are some things I think we need to address, just because we've grown and things have changed. But I want to look at, when I said options, I want the consultant to look at options for Planet Ice. Whether or not we should extend that contract, whether or not we should make, you know, they should make improvements in the interim, you know, or whether we should let the contract run out and take ownership of 4 rinks, and if so, what would that building look like in 10 years, and what would the costs be to bring it back up? So I want to see almost like a matrix around it, because I don't know that we can move on to looking at ice citywide until we know what the future of Planet Ice looks like. I mean, are they going to be a factor in the future? Because that will determine whether we need more. And I also think that we have to look at that in the context of geographical location. Is it the right place to move forward? Are we better to let the buildings run the course of their life and sell the land as industrial land and use the money to partner with somebody somewhere else? So to me, there's a lot of questions that need to be answered around that arrangement, that partnership. I think it's served us well, but I think we also now have to look at how could that look in the future in terms of location and the context of how we're going to provide more ice and possibly dry floor in conjunction with that. So to me, I'm really looking for some real concrete data that we can make decisions on and move forward. Thank you.
Okay. Nobody else? It's the motion as amended. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. So instead of referring that one, I'm glad that Councillor O'Neill was able to bring that one back from the brink. Sorry, that was a bit obscure. Mr. Clerk.
Next item, item 16, is the management of Chafer Beetle infestation in city parks and landscapes. Staff recommendations that Council approve the 2015 remediation work plan as outlined in the report, and to allocate $100,000 from the Infrastructure Reserve Fund to fund the necessary repairs caused by the beetle and implement preventive measures to help reduce future damage.
Moved by Councillor Asmussen, seconded by Councillor Reid. Councillor Wilson on the Chafer Beetle.
Thank you. I read the report with a lot of interest because this has been a big issue, and we've all heard a lot about it. A couple things I was concerned about. One, we are going to be advocating that people have healthier lawns, which means they'll have to water it more often. We're going to be watering our grass more often. Has there any analysis been done about what this might do to the water flows of the Coquitlam River?
Mr. Alloway.
Yes, through the chair. We have not done that analysis. There's going to be a number of reports this year on the Chafer Beetle, some through our engineering and public works, probably later in the spring, more related to public information around what to do in the summer, et cetera, and some analysis might be undertaken at that point. The importance of this report was try to get immediate and early information to Council around the damage to public property. And so that was the reason. We did complete an audit on the heels of some other public information that was coming out in other communities as well, and we wanted to make sure we got out early enough this year, and that's why we did bring this forward earlier than we would normally do so for more of the public announcements in advance of the upcoming probably onslaught later in the year. So that was the reason, and some of the analysis has now been undertaken, but it was very important to highlight this to Council as soon as we could.
Thank you. Because I'm just really concerned, right? We have a lot of incidents in the summer of fairly low flow. We've had fish die as a result of that, and it just seems to me that we're setting our city up to have water not a water shortage, but water flow shortages, and I think we just need to look at that a little bit more carefully. And I guess, you know, my other question is, can some of this grass that we're trying to repair be replaced with something that wouldn't require as much maintenance and as much irrigation and that sort of thing?
Through the chair, yes. The report outlines kind of a three-pronged approach. One is to try to maintain the grass where we currently have lawns that are intended for people to play on or use. So that's a little bit different. And then we want to identify areas where we can switch out for lawn alternatives, and that will work where there's light foot traffic, so it doesn't cause tripping hazards, but it couldn't handle big play. And then the third would be where we'd actually plant shrubs. So anytime we plant the lawn alternatives and the shrubs, there wouldn't be irrigation required. The other thing I wanted to say about the irrigation is that when we automate the system and it's in ground, we currently have an automated system that allows us to use weather stations that apply the minimum amount of water at the right time to be effective. So that's a tool that allows us to make sure that we're not overwatering anywhere. We're already using it on the sports fields, and that would be the goal here. We try to use it as responsibly as possible where there's heavy use.
And it would be able to be done from midnight to 3 a.m. when most people aren't. Okay.
Exactly.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, I was going to raise about the same question. Is that first of all, we're doing that at night, which is not. When I worked for the Parks Department, the only time we could irrigate was 9 to 3 when we set up sprinklers, and things have changed a lot. And we also don't want people to irrigate more often. We want them to irrigate seldom but deeply to get otherwise. I gather that frequent watering that's for 15 minutes is part of the problem. The roots are right at the surface because they don't have to go deep to get the water, and therefore. Is that it? I see nodding, but there we go. Ms. Reinheimer.
Your Honor, yes, absolutely. Growing a healthy lawn does mean being really prudent about both application of fertilizer and aeration as well as watering. Overwatering is actually probably worst. But for sure, to keep lawn vibrant and healthy, we have usually a guaranteed 6 weeks in the summertime where if you don't water it, it'll go dormant. And if it goes dormant, it collapses, so it becomes a very unattractive place for people to play or picnic or do any other activities like that. So part of our challenge is to try to keep the grass happy but not overwater it for sure.
Thank you. Councillor Cirillo.
Well, I have to say I was very happy when I saw the future controls. It's a shame that it came through the Chafer Beetle, but I'm really happy because one of the things that has always bothered me is not providing adequate turf for kids as they just want to go outside and play with a ball or run around. And you know, there's kids in our community that don't have a ride to nice turf, and it's always seemed a shame that we weren't keeping a higher standard. So I have to say I'm really, really happy about that. My next question would be is can we take a portion of the funding that's allocated for sports field strategy to help with the irrigation of some of these fields, because they are going to be better quality fields that we may be able to use more. So that's one question I would have. I mean, obviously it wouldn't cover all of it, but for some of the fields.
Your Worship, the current sports field strategy identifies kind of the highest priorities and basically has a allocated use for all of the funding that's currently available. But for sure, wherever we have an existing irrigation system, the cost of expanding it to cover the lawn areas is actually relatively modest. So that would be part of our goal, is to identify the places where we can just expand the existing irrigation system to the lawn, the playing, the activity lawns, as opposed to the sports field. So in that way, I think that we're already planning to leverage the sports field infrastructure to make this work.
Right. Well, I just have to say I'm really happy, and I'd love to see some pictures in the summer of kids using fields that haven't been used for a long time now that they've been upgraded, and I think that's awesome news. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Rasmussen.
Well, thank you very much. A good report, staff, and I think the damage to city facilities, you've had a lot of public people complaining about the Chafer Beetle and the damage, and I think people are complaining, well, nothing happened to the city. Well, it is happening to the city. It's happening all over. My committee, Environmental Committee, will also be having this as a discussion item about the Chafer Beetle, and if there's any other thoughts or processes that can come through that group of professional biologists will be used. So I'm glad to see, I'm not glad to see as there's a cost and implication to this, how we can better deal with the Chafer Beetle. Some of the recommendations, hopefully the committee can come up with some other recommendations to help get a better handle on reduced our future costs on this. To the concerns about Coquitlam River only takes a portion of ours, the hydro reservoir first. We pay hydro for the use of the water out of there for lack of generation. Our main sources of water still come from the Seymour Capilano River, and so that's the Coquitlam is a secondary flow. It's not used for all of Coquitlam, but it's a hydro generation first for hydro, and there's stipulations on the flows and for fish protection through that on the Coquitlam watershed. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no one else, this is the Chafer Beetle plan. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Next item, item 17, concerns Town Centre Parking Management Amendment Bylaw number 4553. Staff recommendations that Council give first, second, and third readings to Town Centre Parking Management Amendment Bylaw number 4553.
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Rasmussen. Seconded by Councillor O'Neill. Councillor Rasmussen, brave as always.
That's right.
All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Zerillo is opposed. The motion carries.
Item 18 concerns the City of Coquitlam 2015 Local Improvement Parcel Tax Review Panel. Staff recommendations that Council approve the first sitting of the annual Parcel Tax Review Panel for Wednesday, April 15th at 1:15 p.m. in the City Council chambers, and to approve the second sitting of this panel for Thursday, April 16th at 10 a.m. in these chambers if required.
Moved by Councillor Asmundson, second by Councillor Zerillo.
We need amendment for it to allow it to go till midnight.
But that amendment has to be passed during the meeting itself. Yeah, okay. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. The audience at home will please want to mark that on your calendar. That'll be riveting television. Of course, it won't be on TV. It'll be on the internet.
Item 19 is the 2015 Council meeting schedule. These are proposed amendments. The recommendation from staff is that Council approve the following amendments to the 2015 Council meeting schedule: the cancellation of Council and committee meetings on those Mondays which feature a public hearing, and the addition of strategic priority standing committee meetings to be held on March 25th and December 9th.
Moved by Councillor Morrison, second by Councillor O'Neill. This was an attempt to manage the workload and the lateness of public hearings and the lateness of council meetings on nights that have public hearings because, well, primarily because we want council to be able to make the right decisions at 10 in the evening rather than have a very, rather than the wrong ones at midnight. Thank you, Councillor Reid. All in favor? Opposed? And that outstanding change passes unanimously.
Item 20 is the Metro Vancouver Board and Brief for their meeting of March 6th. Our board representatives are available to respond to questions, and the staff recommendations that Council receive the brief for information.
Motion to receive would be in order.
Come on.
Second?
I'll go with Councillor Morrison and Councillor Asmundson to receive and second. All in favor? No, all in favor? No. We agreed that you're
cut off.
There's no quota. There's
Councillor
no quota.
Pedant. I mean, Councillor O'Neill.
There's no quota. The ice is getting really thin now. Yeah, so I wonder if any of our representatives at Metro Vancouver Board can answer this question: whether or not it's standard policy for Metro Vancouver to grant municipalities money in order to host meetings. It's on page 3 of this report, talking about City of Vancouver receiving, City of Burnaby receiving a grant of $10,000 from Metro Vancouver to host the FCM board meeting that just took place earlier this month. This just struck me as a little unusual, but maybe it's usual. So I just want to know what the practice has been in the past.
Do you want to take it?
The practice has been that the council rep that goes to Metro Vancouver would know something about this topic because of previous board meetings that had been held in the Burnaby area. But I'm going to have to defer to Councillor Hodge.
I raised it, and I did not get a clear answer other than I think it's been done in the past.
That was raised at the meeting, and we all deferred to those who knew more about it because it had been done in the past. It is simply something that I guess they do try to do the board meetings across the country, partly so that the board gets a better grasp for the issues in various regions. The cost of hosting that is significant for the one host community, and I guess that was the decision where if it took place in Toronto or Montreal or Calgary, it would be hosted by 1 million people. If it takes place in Burnaby, it's hosted by 200,000 on behalf of 1.5 million. So the 1.5 million contributed to that. We're a 22 community metropolitan region compared to, say, Toronto, which is a single community metropolitan region that would have, it wouldn't be a burden on any section of Toronto to host it because it's a unicity.
That makes sense as far as it goes.
It actually wasn't their explanation either. That was just my assumption of their explanation.
That's right. Well, it would have seemed to me that the FCM could have paid for this, but if it's a burden, I don't know why Metro ends up paying for it. But keep asking questions about it, okay? Next time it comes up.
We thank you. We would be amiss if you didn't ask questions.
Questions about asking questions, which is good. Thank you.
So the motion is to receive. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Motion to adjourn by Councillor O'Neill, seconded by Councillor Asmundson. And before we adjourn, some words of wisdom. This is from psychologist Clark Moustakis. The most dramatic conflicts are perhaps those that take place not between men, but between a man and himself, where the arena of conflict is a solitary mind.
Is that advice?
All in favor?
Those may not be captured in the minutes.
All in favor, opposed, carried unanimously. According to our procedure bylaw, we will allow up to 15 minutes of questions from tonight's audience on any items on tonight's agenda, any items at all, any questions at all, including any staff members, any future staff members, former staff members. Thank you all for coming.